is a template and like has a bunch of empty boxes. And then when you want to apply it, you start filling in the boxes.
Yeah.
So the application ends up being no different than the general theory.
Yeah.
Whereas I think what you have at ISSS is a lot of situations where the application folks have invented their own frameworks.
Mm-hmm.
And there is no theoretical underpinning for it.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, or if there is, it's not the same as a metaphysical framework that, you know, maybe the philosophers would work out, or Len is trying to work out in looking across lots of systems and trying to deduce isomorphies.
Yeah.
You know, or that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So it's just part of the disconnect.
Yeah.
But when I saw this with John, I thought, wow, you know, not only does this simple logical structure tell us how ontology is related to epistemology, but it actually does link theory and practice.
Yes, yes, yeah. We have a similar kind of situation at work at Airbus. So I'm the overall architect for our engineering processes for the division. And the reason why we're putting in place an overarching architecture for the whole of the division is, you know, let's say the 150 or so programs that we have across the division have all essentially invented their own frameworks. When you look at their frameworks, fundamentally, they're all essentially following what is known as the engineering V model, which again, I think is based on system principles. You know, the fact that systems can be, let's say, analyzed in terms of understanding the interactions and combinations of the components into a whole. And by understanding the whole, you can specify requirements for the components. And then those components themselves are systems, and you can look at the parts that make up those components, and you can through a process of design work out what the requirements for the parts are, and then you can build things back up together in the physical integration and verification process. So fundamentally, all of these different programs are all following the V model, but they've all invented their own process structure. And as a consequence, every single program has a different language and a different way of doing things, which as you can imagine is very inefficient and ineffective. So by putting in place an overarching framework based on international standards for processes, we can make some real step change in terms of effectiveness and efficiency. And we will be able to digitalize our ways of working. Whereas at the moment, largely the way of working is based on handcrafting documents and using PowerPoint and Visio diagrams and stuff like this. So moving into, you know, a more modern model-based systems engineering approach, you know, which is really, I would say, a scientific approach. Whereas what we have at the moment is alchemy, in our systems engineering.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I didn't understand the V model. I saw you present it in Oregon. But, I should probably look at that, but I don't want to.
No. I think it's interesting again because I think it is relatable to the relational model. Those four phases are very distinct, especially when you're creating complex systems. You know, you have the conceptualization part, you have the architecture part, you have the design, and then you have the realization essentially. So again, we can take benefit from the relational model because what we've naturally done, just based on our experience, is we've created what we call phase reviews and maturity gates for the phases of engineering, and we use that as the backbone essentially for our scheduling and our planning, and the key events in our life cycle of engineering. So again, I think that's directly relatable to relational theory and that cyclic model.
Yeah. So what do we do?
Well, so I think that there are other let's say, general models that would form the basis of our system science. Certainly the relational model is one of them, but I think that there are others. This kind of diagram hints at that. Here we have leaps in complexity, and I think each one of these represents a full cycle where a new level of system complexity comes about because of the interactions of the components. So all the way up to our geopolitical states, and now potentially moving up to what some people call Gaia, a true living system, that represents a planetary whole.
So let me ask you a couple of questions here. What is the explanation for how, trying to pick up a level, well, pick any level, but for how cells become multicellular organisms? What's the mechanism for that to happen?
The key mechanism really was the coming together of cells in terms of eukaryotes. So prokaryotes, as you probably know, these are non-nucleated cells, and eukaryotes are nucleated cells. This feature gave the affordance for new relationships across eukaryotic cells, and those new relationships led to the formation of multicellular organisms.
So let's go now from atoms to molecules.
Mm-hmm.
What's the mechanism there?
Well, the mechanism there is electron sharing across atoms. So again, there's a when atoms are formed, there's the affordance for new relationships at that level.
Okay, so now you see what John Torty was doing was he had a sequence like this, but his sequence was based on lipids at the beginning and something before that came from the Big Bang, which he didn't specify. But then lipids, basically being bubbles, they would float.
Yeah.
So then you got float bladders, and then because you had that kind of air sac thing, you got lungs. And so he had a sequence like that.
Yeah.
And he was suddenly astonished that the sequence, seemed to be cohesive.
Yes.
So he said there must be some general principle from the beginning to the end that is guiding each step in the transition. So in other words, the explanation of how quanta produce nucleons and how nucleons produce nuclei, how nuclei produce atoms, on up the sequence, the mechanism should reflect some general principle that's the same at every level.
Yeah, yeah.
Now that turns out to be the holon.
Yes, I agree.
But if you applied that view, you would get a different sequence, because in fact, it doesn't say that you would go from prokaryotes to eukaryotes.
There are things that happen in between as well. Yeah. So
you would go from a prebiotic form to there is a sequence, but probably the sequence goes from you're right. It could go from prokaryotes to eukaryotes, but eukaryotes may not be the last one in the sequence. In fact, it could be bacteria that are last.
So
it's just a matter of how the functions combine to produce those transitions. Anyway, that's not my point. That would be that would be, you know, for experiment and 10
Yeah.
years discussion.
Yeah.
But my point is that you can't take a theory like this and set it alongside of the relational theory because they're fundamentally different animals.
Yeah, that's right. But these
This
are
is applied. This is an application. Now, it's an application of what? And the main thing that it's applying is the concept of hierarchy. So we're already in a completely different theory.
yes. No, what I'm trying to express, I think, is that there are complementary general theories. Yeah.
But they're not.
From multiple perspectives.
But see, I wouldn't count this as a general theory. This is a specific application to a very well-defined sequence of events.
Mm.
The theory behind this is not stated.
Well, the theory behind this is essentially that lower level systems can come together to create higher level systems in terms of orders of complexity. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a pretty weak theory. You know, it's like, well, small stuff makes big stuff. You know that. I mean, I admit that something like evolution is pretty simplistic too. It's like anything that survives. You know.
Yeah.
But,
I mean, the richness of this starts to become apparent when you think about the different types of let's say emergence that are possible. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So these are grand leaps of emergence. You know, grand leaps of complexity.
But we're not even sure that those are the correct stages. Maybe they are. And the thing is that this isn't a theory. This is a result of.
Yes.
This is an application.
Yeah,
so,
I agree. But by analyzing the results, you may come up with the theory for explaining why this does what it does.
Right, but if you're looking for general system theory, you have to compare the theories. You can't compare the theory with a data analysis. Because in fact, there is no vector from data analysis to theory. That's a myth. You know, we have this idea that of a scientist with crazy hair staring at data and losing sleep, and then suddenly, eureka, I found it, and seeing it in the data. But actually, you gain a lot of experience from data, and then you get an intuition about theory, and then you go back to the data to check out the theory.
Yes.
You know, it's an intuitive leap to the theory. And so you can't compare a data analysis to a theory as far as being alternatives.
Yeah.
You know, you can compare them as far as testing the theory, but they aren't alternatives. They're different things.
Yeah. I mean, this is essentially the scientific method, again related to relational theory. You know, you've got ideas which then become frameworks, and then from that you can then derive principles for creating assets for engagement.
What's an asset?
Things like resources, tools. These are systems essentially. Okay. Yeah, these are things.
Okay.
And these are things in society.
Yeah, better word than technology. Yeah, assets.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So and you know, there was this paper, Scientific Method in Brief, which essentially identified key. Yeah, carry on.
Excuse me for a second. Somebody's at the door. And I have
go
to
ahead.
Go through a little dance here to get around them. Hold on. Sorry about that, Gary.
All right, you're welcome.
Back in.
Yeah. So, what?
People come to the, okay. Yeah, people come to the door, you know, like with package delivery,
Yeah.
and I keep the door closed because I want to keep the distancing.
Yes. Yeah. Well, we have a dog, so if anyone comes to the door, he makes a horrendous noise.
All right. Sleep, relax, white noise, music. Why is that on?
I don't know.
I didn't do that. At least I didn't think I did that.
Well, your computer has a mind of its own, doesn't it?
iTunes suddenly started up. I don't know what's going on with this thing. So now I've lost the video.
Okay.
So are you still sharing your screen?
I am. Yeah. You probably need to
I got
tap.
it.
Okay.
I got it.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. So what we've got here are essentially key performance indicators on whether a science is useful or not. Yeah. So we've got our different, let's say, our different stages isn't quite right, but these are different stages of understanding or different stages of science, if you like.
Phases might be a good word.
Yeah. Yeah.
A phase of science or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So relational theory is essentially a framework for understanding. Yeah,
I agree.
Yeah, and that those frameworks can arise from a number of different mechanisms.
However,
Yeah.
I would put principles before frameworks, because as a framework, relational theory is based on very specific principles that came from assumptions. Ideas would be assumptions, actually, about nature.
Mm.
And from those assumptions, you develop a set of principles, and then you could put those principles into a framework. And then after that, so instead of, I would put another box in there between ideas and framework, call that box principles, and then rename principles to theories.
Yeah,
and then theories can produce assets.
Yeah.
You know, actually working models and tools and like that.
Yeah. Yeah. So for me, a principle is your basis for acting. And you know, of course, there may well be principles for ideas and principles for frameworks, and I don't know, even principles for principles. Yeah.
Well, what constitutes a framework? It's a framework of what?
It's your structure for working within, or for thinking within. Yeah. So a framework is your orientation for your understanding, and based on your understanding, that provides your principles for action. Yeah.
For me, it's the other way around.
Mm.
I don't have a framework until I know the principles. Now,
Well,
maybe that's the difference between a realist and a pragmatist. A pragmatist starts with the framework and then feels that the principles will be constructed, whereas a realist starts with natural principles and then constructs a framework for operating.
Could be.
But I would say that, and we you know, most of ISSS is pragmatists, so we live in that pragmatic world.
Yeah.
But
so, you know, let's look at what principle says. What's the definition of principles? Yeah.
Go spell it right.
Yeah.
You'll get the school, head of the school. Say a fundamental truth. Well, you don't get a fundamental truth after you've established your framework.
Yeah.
In my way of thinking.
Yeah.
But in a constructivist, pragmatist view, you do. The fundamental, there are no fundamental truths except what we all agree on constructively.
Yeah.
So we all get together, we share our ideas, and out of that comes some principles that we're going to move ahead with as if they're true.
Yeah.
But a realist is turning over in his grave. Most of them are dead.
I think we're doomed. I really think we're doomed.
But so obviously that's, and I wouldn't harp on it just to be picky, but I'm trying to help you in the sense that you're trying to work this out for ISSS and compare different GSTs, but we can't compare apples and oranges. So we have to first sort out these kind of problems so that when we compare different theories, we're actually comparing apples and apples.
Yeah. Well, a principle for me, for instance, would be, if you combine blue and yellow, then you get green. That's a principle for me.
So now, how does that depend on your framework?
Well, the framework would be, for instance, your understanding of light.
Right, but if you had a different framework, would blue and yellow not make green?
Oh, it still would, but you wouldn't know why. Yeah, your framework provides the explanation for why something is.
Let's see. Yeah, I still would call that principle box theory and put maybe a different word, but fundamental
right.
Fundamental assumptions.
Yeah.
I would. Well, the ideas are really the assumptions, and then you have principles like axioms.
Yeah.
And then out of that, see, I'm recapitulating the process that in retrospect occurred to get the hold on. And I didn't have the framework until very recently.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until spending more than a decade wrestling with the principles.
Yeah.
There's really no way in my world that the principles would come out of the framework. If they did, it would just be arm waving.
Yeah. Yeah. See, I see principles as I'm not sure. Do I see? So I see. I'm really not sure anymore. I don't know.
But how do we decide? See, that's the other thing is there a way of
I think we
determining what happens when people build frameworks, what the process actually is?
Yeah. But I think the relational model is probably going to be the way that we work this out. Maybe the way we use terms at the moment is not the right use of terms. Depending on your view, on your worldview, as you say, maybe the terms mean different things. So for me, principles are what you use when you are. I mean, I think that there are principles everywhere. There are principles for conceptualization. There are principles for architecture, there are principles for design, and there are principles for realization. But your architecture for me is your framework. Yeah, the architecture of a building is the framework for its design.
Well, if we're going to create something for general use and to communicate to the public and to build an education curriculum, shouldn't we stick with textbook definitions?
Which textbook?
The one you just picked up. You just went online and did Wiki pretty good.
Yeah.
I mean, any of them really. I don't know. Does Oxford Dictionary give a different definition? Do you see a definition in here that fits what you're talking about? General scientific theorem or law that has numerous that could be more evolved. See, origin has, principle to me is part of the ontology that you're establishing.
Mm.
Before you, and framework is part of the epistemology, although not really. In mine, the framework is both. But meaning, yeah, look at the British always know best.
Yeah.
What does Cambridge say?
Well, this is Cambridge. Yeah, a basic
Cambridge,
idea or rule that explains or controls how something happens or works.
That's much closer to your usage.
Yeah.
So we have a difference between England.
Dictionaries. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, a basic idea or rule that explains or controls how something happens or works.
Yeah. So Le Chatelier's principle, for instance.
Yeah, it's kind of the same, but they didn't. It's not so much emphasis on being fundamental.
Yeah.
Because a principle or rule could be an arbitrary rule, or it could be some fundamental principle of nature. But see, then it gives a machine works according to the principle of electromagnetic conduction, which is then a fundamental law. County is run on socialist principles, which is a constructed principle. So, yeah, could be either one.
I think its usage again depends on context. Yeah, because
that's the problem, isn't it?
Yeah. Because I think you can apply principles to each of these different areas, because each of these different areas does have its own frameworks for working in that area.
Yeah.
Oh. You know, the way that you were using principles were related to the principles of deriving a framework.
Right. I'm looking for a natural theory.
Yeah.
Whereas a lot of people aren't.
Okay. But again, this was again, you know, and you know, maybe phases is the better term. You know, insights and ideas for observing are the basis of information for situational interaction frameworks, you know, for your orientation.
Yeah, if you qualify the word, that can help a lot.
Yeah.
You know, a situational interaction framework. Well, that tells us what we're talking about.
Yeah. So I see these, and I think relational theory is one of these. It is a set of universal patterns of organization that can be found generally at whatever level of the system we explore. These frameworks.
Relational theory, I wouldn't, let me look at this. Situational interaction frameworks. It really wouldn't fall in that description because it's not an interactional framework. You know, it's a framework that explains how interaction works, facilitated by relations. In other words, are more fundamental than interactions. So when you put relational theory into an interaction category, it's got the cart before the horse.
When I'm talking about situational interaction in this context, I'm talking about the interaction of the scientist or the system person with the framework itself. Yeah. So the relational model is interacting with the scientist.
Why not call that framework application?
Well, what I'm trying to explain is what is the purpose of that framework. So the purpose of the framework is to provide an orientation for your understanding. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But instead of if that's what you're talking about, though, instead of situational interaction framework, what not personal interaction frameworks? You see, because you're talking about the interaction between the framework and a person.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people, I think, would as I
interact.
did,
Yeah.
misinterpret that as being a situation is a situation in the world. An interaction is a physical interaction. So we're talking about frameworks for physical interaction in the world, which has very little to do with complexity or relations.
Mm.
I hope you don't mind me being.
No. It's helpful.
But not very much.
No, what it does is it just demonstrates the difficulty of engaging with this stuff.
Yeah. Well, I wrestled a lot with coming up with general terms for describing a holon, because it's very difficult to get unloaded terms, or terms that aren't defined differently in different contexts. And, we'd like to have different words for the four causes, but it turns out that I couldn't find anything better than what came after Aristotle. So I had to stick with those terms as sort of the general archetype. And then when I try to interpret it and put it into more colloquial language, like, efficient causes dynamics, well, that's when I start getting into trouble. That seems to work fairly well, but other people might have very different concept of dynamics. I use the word, Rosen goes all over the place criticizing the limitations of mechanism. Well, he's talking about a mathematical mechanism. And then I get to somebody like John Torty, he's in the medical field, and for him, a mechanism is just the way something happens. It doesn't have that limitation, and he himself is trying to argue that we have to go beyond that reductionist framework. And then he's talking about, but I have to have mechanisms to go beyond the reductionist framework. So to the mathematician, it makes no sense at all, because you're saying I need a mechanism to go beyond mechanism. So I don't know, I'm blathering, but I understand the problem. Yeah, frameworks for understanding, that might help, because understanding is more associated with humans. Yeah.
Okay. And then we have our principles for deciding. So you have your orientation for understanding, and then within that framework, you then have your principles for deciding what to do. Yeah. And then you have your interaction with the assets for your intervention.
Is there any way that you would be open to combining insight ideas with some idea of fundamental principles?
Yeah. So I think there are fundamental principles associated with each of these.
Yeah, because see, beginning with insight ideas is a very pragmatist, constructivist concept, because everything begins with me brainstorming from scratch. Whereas for the realist, everything begins with me discovering some principle of nature.
Yeah. Well,
but if you put them both there, that could work.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that's why I've got arrows going in both directions. I don't know if that helps at all.
Not really.
No.
Not for me.
No.
But see, because the thing is, what's at the bottom here? What are we beginning with? Insight ideas. Yeah, insight kind of gets at the idea of fundamental principle. You're having an insight into nature. But I just don't like the idea of principles being so far down the chain.
Yeah.
So what happens when you use a principle? Is there a word for that?
Process?
Process sounds a little too generic, but principles, you're applying a principle.
Application.
Application. Yeah, there's got to be something that, like principle, I don't want to say heuristic, but And people would go crazy if you said laws.
Mm.
But see, the way I'm thinking is principles as principles of nature are earlier in the chain. And then at this stage, what you have is the laws or the rules or the methodologies that you're applying. How you're applying those principles to a problem is what I'm see for deciding. Okay, so the video that was playing in the background of Cuomo, he has to make monumental decisions about coronavirus for New York. Now, what are the principles that he's going to decide on? Those come from his framework. So that fits your model. And the framework comes from science or from Trump. So which is it that the frameworks come from? I don't want to just have something there that says that the frameworks come from Trump. Because he has ideas, he has the best ideas.
Yeah, yeah. So how do you derive the principles of nature?
A lot of different ways, through experience, through science, and it's a long-term process. So it's kind of a cultural accumulation.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, but it's the foundations. So like we have a principle. We believe in the Big Bang. I personally don't, but you know, most of science is based on that, and it was adopted as a fundamental principle. Or you have the principle of conservation of energy. You see, does conservation of energy show up 3 steps down the chain here, or have we placed it in our fundamental assumption about how nature works? Now maybe it is 3 steps down the chain.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, is it not fair to say that our principles of nature come about because of our observation of our interactions? Yeah, our actions. I don't know. Could we not say that our principles of nature are based on our engagement with systems?
Well, let's take conservation of energy, for example. What framework would that have come from?
You're asking the wrong guy. I'm not a physicist.
Oh, well, I'm just thinking roughly. So
yeah, Hillary would be a good guy to ask.
Well, I mean, you're right. And there's a framework for material laws, and then the principle of conservation of energy was imposed on top of that framework, really. So yeah, okay, could be framework. I just have to rethink what framework means in that location then.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, okay, I'll go with it. And shut up. I'll shut up.
No, don't. Keep thinking about it.
Yeah, but I think it's okay. But I would like to see something at the bottom there that wasn't entirely, didn't look to be arbitrary, that there was some science at the very bottom. So like the beginning with ideas, well, before you had insights, that's good, ideas and insights. Yeah. Ideas, insights. You know what? I'm not telling you to change your model or your slides or anything. I'm just brainstorming here.
No, I mean,
but at that bottom,
I think this is really valuable, because what I am trying to do is I'm trying to produce a set of slides for a shared orientation.
Right, and I'm just being a sounding board. So you're going to factor all this in and think about what you want to do. But insight, ideas for observing. I'm thinking somehow experience is really at the bottom of all this.
Mm, mm,
And that's kind of pretty basic. I think most people would agree with this, that everything begins with experience.
mm,
Everything above experience is our attempt to explain it
mm,
or use it. So insight, ideas, could experience be at that level? And then instead of saying for observing, just say in parentheses experience. Could that work, or would that mess you up?
sorry, where?
At the first stage, where it says ideas, insights for observing,
Mm,
for experience, or just experience. Initial experience is what I'm thinking.
mm,
And after you've had an experience, say you know nothing and you were born yesterday and you walk into the woods and you see trees and you see animals and then you get hungry and you find out you can eat something. You've had this basic experience. It starts to generate ideas. You start to get insights into how the forest works. And then you come out of that with a framework for understanding it all.
mm, mm,
That makes sense to me.
mm.
Experience. I think you have to emphasize experience at the beginning. You know, all of science is based on that idea. Descartes said, the only thing you know for certain is your experience. Everything else is what you're investigating.
Mm, mm.
You know, the framework for understanding the previous stage, which was pure experience, makes sense to me.
Mm.
Does that make sense to you?
Yeah.
Okay, so then you get a framework. Then you come out of the forest. You've had these great experiences. You went through the fire swamp and the RUSSs. You know that one?
No.
Oh, God, you're missing half your life. Go get the movie Princess Bride.
Oh, right. Yes, I've seen that. Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
The fire swamp.
Oh, yeah. That was
Rodents
a long.
and-
Last time I saw that was probably in the 90s.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm regressing.
Yeah, it was a good film though. I do remember. Yeah, it rings a bell.
Yeah. Okay. I'm sorry. So yeah. So you've had all those experiences. You didn't know what to make of it. Then you come out and you form a framework for understanding it all.
Yes.
So you put your thoughts into some sort of
Yeah. Yeah.
order,
Yeah.
and then okay, then I can see after that you build principles,
Yeah.
and then you apply the principles.
Yeah.
And intervention. Okay, we're good, but I would love to see more emphasis on experience at the very beginning. Yeah, you put it there. Good. Okay,
Yeah.
wonderful.
Yeah. And I've changed this to, would phases be better? Phases in the experience of knowing.
I like it.
Okay. Right.
It's less rigid than stages.
Yeah. So here we've got the four causes. Yeah, using different words perhaps. Yeah. But the first step is for a person is considering a situation. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you perceive your situation as chaotic? If you do, then you gather information and you build a conceptualization. Yeah. A big picture. Yeah.
Yeah. It's the arrows are turned around in a weird way so that you don't get the sense of a cycle.
This is funny.
Well, is it true or not? I don't know.
No, so this is the way we do our engineering. Yeah.
Is it?
Yeah, we encounter a problem or a situation. We gather information. We build our first conceptualization of what that situation is in terms of who are the stakeholders and the things that are involved. So we start to get an appreciation of the context.
No, I was just talking about the curved arrow.
Right.
Like if you flipped each one of the arrow,
Oh, so
then
yeah.
you would get the sense of a cycle.
Oh, okay. So you would just have the arrow pointing inwards instead of outwards.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
But I see your pointing
but
between
then it
those
would go over
boxes.
the text.
Yeah, it's just fine. This is perfectly fine because
Yeah,
the cycle is there, but it doesn't shove it in your face. So that's
yeah.
good.
So this is working out why. Yeah,
Yeah.
this is working out what. So this is working out how, and then
Uh-huh.
this is doing it, and through doing you establish common wisdom.
Yeah.
Yeah. But this also relates to our engineering process, if you like. We have a mission concept review at this point. We have a PDR, preliminary design review at this point. Then we have a CDR, a critical design review, and then we make stuff and put it into the field, and then we have a surprise because whilst whenever you introduce a new system, that there's always a new situation which arises. Sometimes with positive benefits, but often with negative ones. So, what is it? What's the phrase?
So
Yesterday's solutions become today's problems.
Yeah, I'm trying to turn this around and put it in the orientation that I do the hold on in, so that I can that I can relate in my brain how it's functioning.
Well,
I still don't understand why you use a different orientation than I'm doing in the hold on, because I'm trying to publish that as a fundamental theory, and no one would be able to connect it without a lot of work, unless at least it's in the same orientation. But so I think the obvious realization, those quadrants seem a little mixed to me, because see, the formal cause is definitely a design type of problem, and a boundary condition top down. And so then that would go into the obvious energy. Yeah, okay, then the material would be the lower right.
Yes.
But realization doesn't belong in that material quadrant. Oh no, that would be design. No, the next one would be the process. So
yeah, this is the process here. This is process.
But you got it called design. So architecture and design, I think, should be the same. And then power, force, process.
That's not the case. Architecture and design are two distinct phases of engineering. Yeah. So architecture is the appreciation of the whole. Yeah. That's where your framework for working within is defined. So that's where you, for instance, define the features of the system that you want to create in terms of its wholeness. But it's a conceptual. Some people call this the conceptual
governing
design.
construction. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So it looks to me like you have final cause on the upper left. That's where you're doing your inspired work and the architecture of the whole problem.
Yes.
And then you're doing the design work, which is governing. Formal cause is governing.
Yeah.
And then what is that governing? It should be governing process in the lower right. The actual work. And you have some of that there. Best practice, energy, mass. Why does it say obvious? What does that mean?
This is the perceived obvious. This is the way that the quadrants are perceived. So this is the domain of experts here.
Okay.
Yeah.
These are common in engineering, you're saying.
Yeah. This is the domain of the common person. Yeah. This is the wisdom that everybody knows. Yeah.
All right. So in simplistic terms, starting from the upper left, we have reflection and inspiration.
Yes.
And then you have a plan.
Yeah.
And then you have action.
Yeah.
The obvious. And I can see from an engineering standpoint that actions seem obvious. And then you have the results of that, which it wasn't obvious because you got chaotic and confusing results.
Yeah. Yes. Sometimes.
But why? And then at that point, that's where observation goes, is in that lower left.
Yeah, that's right. That's observation here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But conceptualization, I would move that back up to the upper left, but maybe you have other reasons for keeping it there. Conceptualization, it's like, well, yeah, conceptualization. Could you say observation instead of conceptualization?
Yeah.
And then up in the upper left is where you reflect on your observations and and then you go redesign, and then you go reapply, so on. Anyway, it's all good. Figuring out the exact words is always a game.
Yeah.
You have to think of the audience and what overall pattern you really want to convey. And they change. You'll be happy with some terms today, and then tomorrow you'll look at it and say, "Well, that doesn't really capture it."
Yes.
That's what I've experienced anyway.
Yeah.
Okay, did I say that last bit with the 4 pop-up boxes?
That one. Yeah.
Yeah. So we need to collaborate. Okay, we need to get organized. We need to collaborate. We need to get out there and do. Exactly what we said. We need a common vocabulary. Right. See, common vocabulary would be observation.
Yes.
Leading into reflection, where we need to get organized.
Yeah. And this
so
is where
I really would.
This is where we are at the moment.
Well, why don't we call that? I call that middle one unity.
Okay.
But I really would suggest changing conceptualization to observation. I think that might, and then realization. Realizing the process. Yeah, making the process real. Sure. But that's just a suggestion, only if you like it and you think it works for the engineers.
I do like it, but then there's the before. So in the engineering process, architecture is where it's still a framework, but now it's a formal framework. You've actually created the relationships of your system as a whole.
Right.
Before you do a formal model, which we call an architecture, there's a phase which is you're taking your observations and you're drawing something, for instance, on a whiteboard, and just linking up some of your observations in terms of essential concepts, and that process of pulling together your observations into something that you can see as a big picture is a conceptualization.
I see. Well, just that one word change, when I look at it, I go, yeah, that's the cycle. Whereas before, like, what?
Okay.
So that one word change and flipping it left or right would make it match the whole on.
Okay. Yeah.
Because you're going a right-hand circle, and I'm, for whatever reason, Rosen did a left-hand circle. Doesn't matter technically; it's identical, but it's just visually, and maybe there's good reasons for doing it differently. Because it should look like something that was created by engineers for engineers, rather than something borrowed.
Yeah. Mind you, this comes back to that top down, bottom up discussion we were enjoying so much. Yeah, because a lot of our traditional engineering does actually come the other way around as well.
Well,
you have people who do stuff and then they work out why they've done it later.
That's right. And that's what the Holon's the same way. In one direction is a generative cycle. It's where things get produced. And then the other direction is a cognitive cycle where you're trying to figure it out.
Yeah. So why the hell did that happen?
What the hell was that? Oh, and that's what science is. Science is, what the hell was that?
Yes. Yeah.
And in that middle where you say disorder, I'm not sure why you say disorder there, but why don't you say disorder or unity with a question mark? Because the cycle either commutes or it does not commute, and you want it to commute.
Yeah. Okay.
Does that work?
Maybe. So the reason why so disorder is your starting point before you're in a situation you haven't started gathering your information yet. Yeah, you just don't know. You don't know where you are. Yeah, you've got no clue.
All right, so that center is the whole. Center is the whole cycle. Yeah. Why don't you do a quote from Schrodinger or one of those guys, which would be order from disorder. Would that work?
Yeah.
Order from disorder?
Yeah, I mean that's essentially what we're talking about here.
Okay, and that's right out of the physics books.
Yeah.
A lot of the engineers would recognize it.
Yeah.
You might put quotes around order too, because we don't know what the hell that is.
I think that well, maybe I shouldn't go. I think that order is systems. You know, systems are order.
Well, yeah, it's just that we may not understand it. And
yeah, I mean, I would even say systems from disorder.
Systems from disorder. Systems from chaos.
Yes.
But yeah, if you do order from disorder, then it plugs you into the physics books. If you do systems from chaos, that plugs you into the system science group.
Yeah.
So either one, I would say, works great. Systems from chaos works as well.
Well, I think there's true chaos and there's also perceived chaos.
Yeah. So chaos, you may not want to use it in a pejorative sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
Order from something.
Yeah, because in this kind of thin model, when they talk about these things, it's what you perceive. So you perceive the chaotic, and in order for you to move from the chaotic to the complex, you have to identify information. You have to observe. You have to start building up that conceptualization. Once you've got that conceptualization, you can then start to formalize it with an architecture. With your viewpoints, your
if you want to be more
understanding.
If you want to be more proactive than saying observation, what you just said probably could work too. Conceptualization, because you are looking at the chaos. You are conceptualizing.
Well,
but, I think that's more in your connecting box there. The illuminating information theory. That's where you're conceptualizing. So it's nice to say observation, conceptualization, and then architecture. It's good. Yeah, I think it's beautiful. It's wonderful. Yeah.
Well, I, to be perfectly honest, John, the reason why I started doing this was because of the presentation you gave, I don't know, in 2016, I think it was. When Bridget and I were working on that little booklet, we came across. I was sitting in your presentation, and you explaining, the relational theory, and I thought, hey, we do that in engineering.
That's wonderful. I mean, it's really, I am finding a lot of feedback like that now, where people are starting to. This person wanted to use the diagrams in a paper about aromatherapy. There's no I just goofing around, I said, well, I keep trying to find ways to apply this that are crazy to see if it'll break at some point. And I said, well, what about the quantum particles? What the heck's going on there? A lot of work.
Yeah.
And so I logged on to did a little search on the fundamental particles, and it turns out that for many decades they had an idea of symmetry, and it won't work. And so they finally got enough data, and they're working on the periodic table of the fundamental particles, and they've got enough data now to show that their concept of how they all relate to each other doesn't work. So they said that we need a whole new model for symmetry. And then somebody wrote an article there in Symmetry magazine showing how they might all fit together. That the model they drew intuitively exactly matched the holon, the 4-quadrant life holon with the 4 subquadrants.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I'm going, okay, I'd never convince anybody that it was science, but I mean, how does that happen?
Yeah.
So it does pop up everywhere.
Yeah. No, I think right at the very bottom level, we have a universal field or a series of fields, and when those fields interact at the very lowest level, information is created from the field interactions, and then that information then becomes conceptually structured in some way.
Yeah.
And then the quarks, as we think of them, are here, and then the color forces, for instance, between the quarks become the formation ultimately of the nucleons.
The top bottom dichotomy is right there in their symmetry proposal, because you have the mass, the massless versus the more worldly ones with mass energy properties. You have the photon being the thing that's producing the behavior. On all, typically it matches up.
Yeah, no, I'm sure you're right.
It's it wasn't even a hypothesis. It was just like, oh, you can overlay the 2 diagrams on top of each other.
Yeah.
They even drew it in the same orientation.
Yeah. And then when those nucleons arise, you then have the potential for additional interactions, which result in new information. Yeah. And then as a result of that information, nuclei eventually come into play. I don't know what the steps are. I mean, here we have the strong force now coming into play. Yeah. But what is the structure or the knowledge which results in those strong forces, which then result in the nuclei? I mean, I don't know. I don't know enough about physics, but I think this continues.
I'll send you the diagram.
Yeah.
It might just be fun, I'm not enough of a physicist anymore to know. I didn't even do the quantum labs in the end of my degree. I switched then to geophysics.
Yeah. So I'm convinced, and that there is a fundamental pattern here. Yeah.
There is. There's a fundamental natural pattern.
Yeah. So what I've done is I've taken that pattern in terms of phases of knowing. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've tried to create a matrix for essentially capturing our knowledge. Yeah. So what we got here is we've got concepts, Yeah, and these concepts help us with our ideas and our communication. Yeah, so these are the concepts. These are the key concepts we use when we talk about systems. Yeah.
Okay.
Then we have our frameworks for orientation. Yeah, and I think the relational model is here. It is a fundamental for understanding the phases of things, the life cycle of things. I don't know. Yeah.
Well, it is a general theory,
Yeah.
so actually everything on your diagram would be part of it. So I'm not sure if you can bin it.
If I can bin it.
I'm not sure you can categorize it in one of the boxes because it produces all of the whole diagram.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's across the top.
Yeah.
In terms of providing a framework for our knowledge. Yeah, because what we're talking about here is again a system. Yeah, this whole thing is a system. Yeah.
In a sense, maybe across the top you have your ontology, and across the left side down the left side you have your epistemology.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So these are different categories of knowing.
Yeah.
Yeah, or different categories of understanding. Yeah. So, we've got identity, which is the togetherness of things.
Yeah.
And when we look at identity and togetherness, these are the things that we talk about. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I think what I've got in mind for our periodic table, or the systems landscape, which is an organization of system types, would be our framework for understanding system identity.
Yeah, the only thing I would not fit well into the holon structure would be the life cycle. That would seem to be reducible to one of the others, probably the identity, because the identity is the cycle. But you have a different idea of identity, togetherness of things versus cycle would be the separateness of things. Yeah, so the cycle is both a unity and a diversity. So you're showing them split out there. Yeah. So it works, but in a graphical sense, so like behavior is one of the quadrants, capability is one of the quadrants, value and consciousness could easily be one of the four. Those could be the four quadrants, but life cycle would be the whole cycle. But you're using the word in a different way here.
Quite probably, yeah.
Quite phases of things, inception, growth, quadrant patterns in the system. Yeah, everything follows a life cycle, even the universe, power, entropy. And then with identity, systems, landscape, knowledge application, layers of knowing, identity, structure, order, systems. Similar things combine into more complex things, resources, domain. Okay, well.
And I'm not saying, I'm not saying that this is right. This is just an example of the kind of things that you could put into the framework. Yeah. What I'm trying to do is, first of all, I'm hoping that we can get a shared orientation on the key concepts. Yeah. And having a way of acknowledging and making use of multiple different models for appreciating systems. This allows us then to recognize that actually there is a value in different perspectives of models, and there is possible to get coherence across them as well. Yeah. So it stops being my theory is the theory, and acknowledging that actually there are many theories, and they're all complementary. They're not necessarily competing.
Well, it's a tough call because there are obviously many ways to divide up a unified whole. And so you have to decide whether you want to emphasize the diversity that's possible or the unity that's possible. You know, I choose to represent the unity in everything. So I force everything into the 4-quadrant structure, reinterpret ideas, and then if I have like, oh, but there's a 5th concept and I want to put that in there too. Well, that's easily done by creating another holon. And I say, well, that 5th concept, if it's important, is either a breakout of one of the quadrants as a whole new cycle, or it's an inclusion of the first holon that I figured out in a bigger one. And so I never violate the principle of the 4-quadrant closure. I simply add a new cycle. And then I put the new concept that I wanted to represent in the new cycle. And at that point I go, okay, there it is. But there's 3 empty boxes. Every time I've done this, it's turned out to be very instructive, because then I start realizing what those 3 other boxes are that more closely relate to my, you know, out of the box concept. And I start to see there really is a different unifying cycle for that concept. So but for a lot of people, the process can seem really boring and reductionistic, because it's like, you've got one template and you're going to force everything into the template. Well, I could force everything into a 3-part template. You know, so what? That's not the real world. But what I'm doing is I'm saying, yeah, there might be 627,000 things, but in order to see it as a natural order, I'm going to do a hell of a lot of work to turn those thousands of things into 4-part holons that are interlinked.
Yeah.
Even if I don't change a single one of them, I just draw a new holon and figure out, okay, what are the logical quadrant associations to that particular concept that would make it whole?
Yeah.
And then I find out it's a different holon than the first one. And actually forcing the 5th element into the cycle instead of keeping it 4 is messing up the cycle. Whereas putting that 5th element into another cycle of its own is actually gaining knowledge, because then I figure out what the missing 3 were that made it valid, and I get to see how it relates to the first idea.
Yeah, no, I get that.
It's quite a process, but it seems to work.
Yeah. I mean, when I looked at these quadrant patterns, you know, there were clearly many different instantiations, essentially, of the relational model. You know, so OODA, for instance, observe, orient, decide, and act, again, is an instantiation of that quadrant. There are many of these. So,
well, if you take any word that you have for what you're thinking and write it down, and then you look at a 4-quadrant model, and you say, how am I thinking of that term? Am I thinking of it as an action? Am I thinking of it as an existence? Am I thinking of it as a template for something else? Or am I thinking of it as sort of the initial inspiration? You know, so you say, is it final cause, formal cause? And you put it there. And then you say, now what are the other things that I could write in these other boxes that would make that self-sustaining, that would reinforce that original thought that I had? So if I put it in the design quadrant, what would it have to design that would come back and reinforce the original concept? And then you start working your way around the cycle. You might end up finding out that, you know what, I wasn't really thinking of it as a design. I was really thinking of it as an action, and you may shift it. But in the process of trying to get that whole diagram to commute with itself as a self-sustaining whole, you learn a tremendous amount about your own thoughts and what it is you really, really wanted to say. So I find it as in enforcing the rigor of the 4-quadrant cycle. I find it as a tremendously powerful tool.
Yes.
For, I think you could call it mind mapping, really. It's a kind of a mind map.
Yeah.
So it's an ordered mind map, is what it is.
Yeah. So the idea of this is that using these knowledge categories, but shaped through the quadrant and also the whole or disorder, depending on your perspective.
Sure.
We're able to potentially provide a structure for our knowledge where we can bring knowledge together within a shared orientation. We can collate, we can compare, we can contrast, and we could potentially also construct, general system models from the models that are available, and I think we already have that here. Yeah. I think in the others we're not quite there yet. Yeah. But we do have existing models which I think fit into this context. So the viable system model, I think, is here. What Ben has been doing with his isomorphies, which are all about system processes, I think are here. Yeah. I think that potentially Bill Smith's model of awareness, information, and influence and control might fit here. So the idea is, I mean, I'm the senior editor for for section 2 of the SE book, the Engage SE book. What I'm aiming to do is actually use this as a way of structuring our knowledge and providing an entry page for each of these segments where an overview is provided. And then from that overview page, you can then go into a page which describes the concepts, the frameworks, the principles, the assets, and the impact on society.
Across the top, you have the framework, basically.
Yes.
Down the left side, you're creating categories that would describe what we actually have in ISSS. Is that the idea?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Why not?
Now the diagram that I sent you, do you need to go somewhere, John? Are you okay?
No, I need to take a pill, but I've got it right here.
Okay. Yeah. Do you remember the systems tree that Bridget and I did? It was this.
Beautiful diagram. I looked at that and I go, wow, that's gorgeous. But I started to figure it out. I go, I don't know how to interpret it.
Yeah. So at the bottom, these were essentially.
Hold on. Let me get a glass of water.
Sure. Go ahead.
Okay, roll them.
So the top represents the attitudes of the systems thinker, and these are almost principles for systems thinking. Yeah. So changing your viewpoint, seeing the big picture, seeking the implicit needs, anticipating the effects. These are all attitudes that are, let's say, recommended for the systems thinker. And these are the things that the systems thinker thinks about when they think about systems. They think about togetherness, structure, relationships, behavior, purpose, and context. And these are, let's say, sub-concepts within the overall concept. So when you think,
you've got 4 branches on the top and 5 on the bottom.
yeah.
Are we saying that we're not going to follow the 4-quadrant structure, or?
Well, this is what we did back in 2012. Yeah.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So this is where we were. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it was useful because, you know, we were able to share this with the engineering community, and it resonated with a lot of them, and they really appreciated it because these were the things that they thought about, and these were good principles for systems thinking, but it can benefit now from the experience we've had over the last 8 years. Yeah. So I put this together to explain where I was going with it. So why do something new? So the original tree was a mix of systems thinker principles in the branches, while the roots were a representation of system concepts. So I had in mind an experiment to create system concepts, not principles, in the domain of engaging with systems. So, you know, that top part can be our experience of systems and relate to the quadrant. Yeah. Additionally, I wanted to expand the root concepts to take into account our knowledge categories about systems. So now we've got 6 categories, and they're different to I think it was the 5. Is it the 5 roots we had before? 1, 2, 3, 4. It's different to these 6. So in this way, we might capture the core system concepts we use in our language when doing system science. That was the idea. I'm not saying the concepts that I've got in the structure are the right ones, but it provides some examples as a starting point to work with. So
yeah,
the first thing is that when you introduce the tree to someone for the first time, they look at it and they go, "Oh, I really don't understand that. It's just too much to grasp." Yeah. So what I try to do is I've tried to introduce the branches with some pictures to give, you know, the impression of the overall concept. So here we have the world of possibilities and disorder. Yeah. Here we have insight and information. Here we have frameworks, knowledge. Here we've got design and projected impact, really. Yeah. And here we've got action in terms of mass and energy.
Okay, so, right, so you're talking to a guy who has, for better or for worse, spent most of his life trying to figure out this holon.
Yeah.
And what you've got here is something that's almost the holon, but just enough different to piss him off.
Okay. Yeah.
So I'm being funny. So if I were presenting this, what I would be tempted to do would be that I would always show the holon framework to reinforce that there's order in everything I'm presenting.
Yeah.
And then if there were something that seemed to step out of the framework,
yeah,
I would think about that and show it as a breakout of one of the 4. Say, okay, because you're always going to be able to do that. So if there's something else you think of that, you know, that you want to put on the diagram because people do it, if you look at your 4 quadrants, you're going to say, well, that's actually a subset or a superset, you know, a subset of one of the 4. And so you break it out as another 4-quadrant map. Now, I don't know if that gets boring to folks if they just figure, oh, you're just a 4-step nut or something, you know, but
yeah.
But here it's obvious to me that you have the exact cycle of the holon.
Yeah.
Framework should be the middle. The framework should go with the globe.
Yeah. So the
Because
intent,
the framework is all four.
yeah. The intent of this is to introduce people to the concepts gently. Yeah, I mean we could.
But you're introducing them to diversity gently, so they'll never decide that there is a unifying order because you've already shown many different ways of ordering it. Why not put frameworks in the middle, just conceptually?
Well, we could put the
and have the tree growing out from the frameworks, or put the frameworks at the bottom where you have branches of understanding. What's the difference between branches of understanding and frameworks and knowledge? It's the same thing. So put the framework there, then you've got your four, and sure, show it as a tree, that's great, but it's still the same model.
So we put the relational model here then.
Yeah, put the frameworks down at the bottom.
Okay.
With branches of understanding. Use all the words on the slide, but just combine those two. Then you emphasize that that's the unity, and the four are the things that create that unity. Or the way you apply a unified concept of nature to those, to do something in a cycle. The cycle of being or something like that.
Okay. Could you send me a nice version of the diagram to fit into that space?
Do what?
The relational model. Could you send me a nice version of the diagram, a little picture that I could put in there?
Okay. Yeah.
No, we'll do that, John.
No, I wouldn't add the picture. I'm just saying move the framework branch down to coincide with the branches of understanding, and then just have four branches. I'm not saying show the diagram. You know, I don't want to shove it in people's face, but I'm saying sort of liminally you follow that model.
Yeah.
Because frameworks are unifying of insight, design. I can't see the lower right and lower left what those are. Are those have labels?
Yeah, this is the world of possibilities and disorder down here.
I don't see the words. It's all off the picture for some reason.
And over here we've got action, mass, and energy.
Yeah, see those are four quadrants of the cycle, and the framework is the cycle, and branches of understanding is the cycle. So I would just combine branches of the root. You know, put the frameworks at the root. Frameworks for understanding or branches of understanding. What's the difference?
Well, so these are frameworks in general. So you know the cycle is from disorder.
Well, wouldn't any framework involve all four of those things?
Yes, any framework would. Yeah.
That's why I'm saying put it in the middle. That's where it belongs.
So the relational framework is a framework for creating frameworks.
Yeah, exactly.
I know, but what I'm trying to show here is the instantiations. These are the instantiations. So let me show you the purpose of this. Yeah, so
it's fine. I mean,
so the purpose is so that we can identify the concepts. So these are concepts related to the world of possibilities and disorder. Yeah, so field, data, infinite, random, spiritualism, chaos. Yeah. These are concepts related to disorder. Concepts related to insight and information are observation, detection, distinction, thought, discernment, philosophy, and idea. Yeah. Concepts related to frameworks are science, organization, architecture, pattern, orientation, viewpoint.
You know what I'd be, I'm just off the top of my head. You know what I'd be tempted to do here? I'd be tempted to, gosh, if I had the slide, I could do it, but.
Well, I have sent it to you, so feel free
to. Yeah, I'm sure it's not, it looks like it's hand drawn, so you can't redraw it. But what I would be tempted to do is where you have that globe of branches of understanding,
Yeah.
somehow the slide is being cut off because I don't see any of the labels in the lower left or the lower right.
Okay.
But what I'd be tempted to do is move that globe to the middle, and here, let me just say this. Okay, I see the whole thing now. Yeah. I'd be tempted to take your framework's knowledge and show that as a root of the globe and show the 4 branches of the holon as the branches. And then the root of the holon could have many different kinds of frameworks, could have 5-part frameworks, 20-part frameworks, who knows? But we've taken all those roots that have built up our knowledge, and now we've turned it into a 4-part whole. So I would look at, I would take, it's just the way I think, but I would make the frameworks roots and then the other 4 branches. Just a thought.
Okay. Yeah, I mean the diagram is it is editable. So you
well,
can,
but the question is whether that conveys the thought that you want to convey. Because see, for me, that's the thought that I would want to convey, is that the framework are at the root, and then we have the results of our thinking. And basically, we went from the framework chaos to the 4-branch harmony.
Yeah.
That would be the message that I would be trying to communicate.
Yeah. Well, these concepts in the branches relate to concepts of the system's experience.
But aren't they different frameworks or not?
No, this is a framework this is a framework simply of concepts.
Yeah, but I mean the blue one where it says frameworks / knowledge. Those are all the different ways that science thinks of itself.
Yeah, well, these are so knowledge is organized information.
Well, we hope, but usually it's not.
Yeah.
So that's what the way I'm thinking is, see, that we've got frameworks and a chaos of knowledge. We have a very disorganized set of scientific knowledge.
We are in disorder at the moment. Yeah.
Yeah, and in the blue one, and I'm saying that's the roots that we have in our history. And
yeah,
now
we don't have a system science at the moment. It doesn't exist. Yeah.
Right, and now what we're doing is we've got these 4 branches coming out of that root that is producing order, is organizing it.
Yeah.
Anyway, I mean, it's almost like what do they call it in theater? They call it a device. There's a message you want to get across. So it's a visual device to make that a root instead of a branch, so that you can say, okay, we're going from disorder to order, like you wrote in the previous slide.
Okay, so those are concepts related to the experience of systems.
Okay.
Yeah. And these are the roots of knowing. Yeah.
Oh, so now you do have roots. I see.
Yeah. So
I can see why my comment would be problematic then.
so here again we got identity of the whole, togetherness of the parts, behavior of the whole, relationships of the parts, life cycle of the whole, phases of the parts, value of the whole, qualities of the parts, the consciousness of the whole, the experience of the parts, the capability of the whole, and the purpose of the parts. Yeah. So, and again some icons to try and get across the essence of the overarching concept.
Okay, well, this is fine, because see, from my way of thinking, which could be crazy, of course, is that the roots could be anything, because everything we've ever done is part of the root.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
But we may not have,
yeah.
we may not have figured out very much about it, but it's
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. Well, these are the things that we think about systems. Yeah. So these are the concepts related to thinking about systems, whereas these are concepts related to these are our branches of understanding. These are our concepts of understanding, whereas these are our concepts
Okay, I
of
can
knowing.
get that. So in other words, the
Yeah.
frameworks are also products of our understanding.
Yeah.
As I can see what you're thinking there. Okay,
Yeah.
fine.
So,
And then,
so what I've tried to do is I've tried to identify, core, so really key concepts related to identity togetherness. Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you're thinking about identity togetherness, these are the things that you're thinking about. Yeah.
Okay.
When you're thinking about behavior and relationships, these are the things you're thinking about.
So let me ask, are the previous diagram and this one, are they meant to be normative, descriptive? What's the third one? Descriptive, predictive, or normative? So it wouldn't be predictive, but see, we could be thinking differently. I was thinking of roots as being descriptive, where we've been, but I think you're looking at the normative roots. In other words, what it should be.
So
are you showing what it is or what it should be?
What I'm showing is I'm coming at this from an engineering perspective again, I guess, from a practice perspective. When I'm thinking about systems, these are the things that I think about, and the more of these things that I think about, the richer my level of understanding. The better I know the system that I'm going to be either creating or examining. Yeah, this is when what I'm trying to do as a systems engineer is I'm trying to understand a situation and formulate a good solution. Yeah, and if I take into account all of these things, it gives me a good level of understanding, so that I can minimize, for instance, unintended consequences, and I can achieve a beautiful system.
Let's go back to the previous slide.
Mm.
Now, this one. Now, has this slide now, since this is a branch, so after you've done all the other stuff, you come to the branch. This is what you're going to produce, or this is, I'm asking.
Yeah.
Is this somehow, so I'm thinking that the other would be more descriptive of what you really do, and then this then become more normative of what you want to create. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, kind of. Yeah. So these are concepts related. So these are concepts related to the experience of systems, and these are concepts related to the systems themselves.
So I guess what I'm asking is, do the branches come from the roots? They kind of do in a tree, the roots produce the branches. So is that the metaphor you're using?
If we go back to the matrix, if we go back to this, these concepts here relate to these. Yeah, and I think what I'm saying is that the concepts that I have in the branches relate to these.
Yeah, the branches are across the top, and the roots are down the left, right?
Yeah, yeah. So I think that there are concepts related to each of these phases as well. Yeah, and that's what
Well,
I'm
I
trying to
get it.
show.
Yeah,
That's what I'm trying to
I
show
get
in
it.
the branches.
Yeah, I get it. Everybody's probably going to have a different take-home message, but
Mm,
what I would take home for me is that what's on the left is the roots of what we typically do in looking at a system, and we're trying to bring some order
mm,
to our thinking,
mm,
and then produce what's in the branches is the ordered thinking.
yes.
I don't know if that works or not.
No, that works for me. I mean, I was doing this as an experiment, really, to see if there was actually any value in it or not. I knew that
I
we
think
needed.
there is.
I knew that we
Yeah.
needed to do some work on our concepts, and sharing an understanding of what the concepts meant.
Well, go back to the table for a minute. Um, so a lot of it depends on what you plan to say about the slides,
Mm,
but it occurs to me that one thing that could be said is just if the branches on the top are essentially the four quadrants plus
mm,
the whole,
mm,
and if you're suggesting that that's a universal order, and if on the left you have a binning or a categorization of all of our work,
mm,
basically,
mm,
thinking,
mm,
then one of the things that's being said here is that in everything we do or have ever done, we can actually find these four elements. And that becomes a pretty powerful statement. In other words, there
mm.
are no empty boxes.
No, there's not. I agree. There are no empty boxes. And if there is an empty box, then we should do some research into it.
Well, it's probably there. We just have overlooked it or something.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's exactly the power of the framework, is it tells you what you might have missed.
Mm,
It tells you two things. If you stick to the four quadrant logic, it tells you what you might have missed because you've got an empty quadrant.
mm,
It tells you what might be redundant.
mm,
And so you have four things and you get them perfectly ordered and they support each other and make a whole. But you say, but I want a fifth thing, and you go, but it won't fit in there. It's not the whole, it's not this quadrant. I can't, but then you say, that's just another way of saying design. It's just another word for design.
yes.
And so I'm going to combine it with design.
Yeah. And then
Or
you
you
can start
say,
to compare.
yeah, or you say, no, it doesn't actually match any of these four quadrants the way they have been refined to support each other. It conceptually or typically matches design, but it doesn't really fit in this particular hole on this particular identity, because the exercise of filling in all four boxes and making them commute, the commutation is very, very important, because the commutation allows you to write a word in the middle that tells you who it is.
Yeah.
I figured out these four things and I know that this is John. You see? And then you go, okay, I've got this fifth thing that's very much like the design quadrant. But you know what? It's not John. It's really Patricia. And so then you have to create another hold-on. You put it in the other hold-on and you go, okay, what are the other three aspects of Patricia? And then you end up filling in those. So you decide, you get to see the gaps, you get to see the redundancies, and you get to see where you have new identities.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, that's good. So what I've now started to investigate. So we've got system knowledge categories. We've got system knowledge concepts, and then related to each of these categories, using these concepts, I think we can start to put together a set of useful questions that you can ask generically about systems and situations to understand better. Yeah. So if you're exploring a problem, you know, as an engineer, for instance, or as a scientist trying to get a better understanding of a particular system, you can start to formulate questions around identity and togetherness. And you know, again, I'm not saying that this is a complete set, far from it, but it's a starting point. So, you know, in any situation, first of all, you know, what is the situation? What distinctions can you make about it? How is the situation defined? What are its main components? What makes this different to other situations? What is your frame of reference? So you can ask this of any situation. Yeah. If we look at a life cycle of whole phases of the parts, how did the situation come about? What are the major events and associated states? What is the environmental context in which the situation evolved? You know, so questions related to these different areas of knowledge that you can ask generally in those situations. And what I've then done is I've taken, you know, what are the insights from the system understanding related to these areas, and I put in Donella Meadows' leverage points. So, you know, the goals of the system, the constraints, parameters, numbers, subsidies, taxes, standards, relates to value of the whole, qualities of the parts, and the questions in this area would help you to identify these things. Yeah. So this is again looking at the utility of the system science in terms of what can it do to help you with your questioning, and what insight then does your questioning lead to? Does that make any kind of sense?
Well, yeah, on an intuitive level, you're pretty logical progression from left to right there as far as going from category to concept to questions to what you get out of it. What's on the vertical? What decides the rows? Where did the rows come from?
I don't know. Well, the first two just simply came from this. Yeah. So
that's what I was wondering.
You got the category and the concepts. Yeah. And then,
so are there, is this the same as the previous one?
Yeah, it relates. It's directly relatable.
Is it exactly the same?
Yeah, it is exactly the same. So the first two columns are exactly the same. So you have the ideas and the categories. So categories and the ideas. Yeah.
And then the rows are the same too?
The rows are the same as well. What's different is the questions and the insights. So I guess you could relate.
Okay, see that's fine. So basically, from the hold-on perspective, this is a different hold-on that relates to the previous hold-on. If I drew it in the hold-on map, I could show exactly how the two of them relate to each other, and then you would see you would be able to decide what a label for this entire slide, which would be the identity of this hold-on.
Yeah.
And you would be able to have a different label for the other slide as to what the identity of that hold-on is. So this might be the inquiry process, I'm just guessing. And the previous one might be maybe conceptualization or something like that. But that's precisely why, if I were doing it, I would strictly adhere to the quadrant. Well, it's a fifth order framework because it has 4 quadrants and the whole. So I would stick to the 5, the 5 part layout, so that people would recognize that each slide has the same order, but it's a different system.
Yeah. So I think this part. So insights from a system understanding leads to your design. Yeah.
Right.
And questions in the pursuit of systems knowledge. It's using your framework. So in terms of the quadrant, this is the top left and this is the top right. You know, it's related to the top left and the top right.
Did I ever show you what I did in Mary's book for the DPSIR environmental assessment framework?
No. That's
Let me
one book
share that.
I've always meant to buy, but I haven't got it.
It's expensive, I think.
Yeah.
Let me find that. It's in a. I've got it in. I'm pretty sure I can find it here pretty quick. Let's see. Then I can share it.
Yeah, because I do think the DSRP is relatable as well to the 4 quadrants.
Yeah, you're familiar with that framework?
Yeah. Distinction, systems, perspectives, and relationships.
Oh no, it's a different one. Maybe it was derived from that, but this is for environmental assessment in the European Union. It's driver pressure, state, impact, and response.
Okay, no, it's different. Yeah, no, I was thinking of Cabrera's framework.
It might be the same conceptually. I don't know, or maybe one came from the other. But you know, a driver would be like social factors that sort of kick things in motion.
Yeah.
Pressure would be, you know, you're actually out there tilling the land and creating agriculture or building factories. So it's physical. That's the do action quadrant.
Yeah.
State, of course, is the results of all those pressures, and then the impact is what that state means as far as the health of the system. And then response, okay, they had DPSIRs, 5 things, which is fine, but then in the HOLON framework, response is a whole nother cycle. And so you have, so instead of just saying, oh, that's a box, no, that's a whole cycle of its own.
Yeah.
And then the 2 cycles feed into each other. I'm going to get this because I think you might appreciate it. And they feed into each other. So then what happens when you frame it that way, you get adaptive management. Whereas that wouldn't be obvious, you know, in the first, in just the DPSIR, and people draw DPSIR in many different ways, you see. So, okay, let's find this thing. Chapter 2, frameworks. Let's hope it's that one. Yeah, it might be under models. Yeah, okay, it's a different one. Hold on. Chapter 4 someplace.
This was, is it Principles of Systems Research? That was the title?
Yeah. No, was it Principles? I don't, maybe it was.
I can't find it.
Mary Edson. Heck, where is this thing?
Guide to Systems Research. That's it.
Yeah, guide. That's what it was. Yeah. So there is one, Principles. Did somebody else write a sequel or something like that?
No, I actually couldn't find a book. There, which is.
Wow.
£90. Actually, it's £65 for the hardcover. That's not too bad.
Let me see if I can find this another way. Yeah, I've got a PowerPoint on it. I think I can do it that way. Okay, here it is. This is good enough. How do I share this? So you're sharing off?
It is, yeah. Yeah.
So I need to be sharing.
Yes, there's a little. If you hover to the bottom of Zoom, you'll see share screen.
Share screen. Yeah, a little green thing there, huh? Should be able to go into. Do you see it?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I like it. Yeah.
Okay.
Driver, pressure state, and impact. Yeah.
So basically, these are two holons, and the inner one represents what's happening in the ecosystem, and then the outer one represents the response cycle management.
Yeah.
So you start with the driver on the inside. You see my cursor too?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So you start with driver, and there's, it's like, you have a policy, say would be a driver, and then that has an effect on the ecological functions, which is or what you do on the landscape. So that creates a pressure on the ecosystem, which changes its state. The structure of the system is different, which then feeds into the ecosystem context, which is like all the different models that are contexts for the system, and then the human, the driver is part of that context. This is the physical driver without the human so much being considered. But if you add the response cycle, then from the status, you say, okay, we don't like this. We've observed it and we've assessed that we have a degrading ecosystem. So now we're going to go into the management context. And now we have a response cycle where we create a plan. We create response actions, management program, and then we observe the results of the program. There are ecosystem changes, and that goes back into the ecosystem context, and it also continues a new management cycle. So this is showing that the two holons are closed to final cause. Final cause is like the target that you want, or where is the system going and where do you want it to go? That's final cause. And so the closure here is on intention, basically. You could have closure on material. And like if I were drawing industry and how industry relates to the environment, I could be saying how there's a closure in material because we take resources from the ecosystem, we use them in manufacturing, and then that puts an effect back in. Well, it would go back in, not to there, but it would go into here. That changes the status because you have new material coming in. So you have material being taken out, material going in. So you're taking out resources, you're putting in waste. You have a material closure. And you can do that with any of the quadrants. Because you could change the actions, the processes. You could be introducing new processes to the system.
No, I like it.
But I'm just showing how, so that's why I insist on keeping the 4-quadrant analysis. And once I figure out what belongs in these labels, I have driver, impact, pressure, impact, driver, pressure, state. Well, then I know that this is a impact assessment cycle. I've identified this cycle. And if I change one of these things and start to mess with the words, I I might come up with a better word that in my mind makes it more identifiable, or I might mess it up to where I say, I can make that work, but it's a different system. So if you change any of the quadrants significantly, it becomes a different system.
Mm.
And that's why identity is based on the cycle.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
Mm. Right,
Back to you.
I've ordered that book. I've ordered the book. I found a second-hand copy, which was a bit more affordable.
I'm afraid to read it. You know, you write something, you go, I don't want to go back. I want to see how stupid I was.
Yeah.
I don't want to read what I should have said.
Right. Yeah. Well, I'm gonna try and present some of this stuff on Saturday, at the Saturday session. So I don't know if you're there or not, but if you are, you can help me out.
I'll try to be.
Okay.
I'll try to be there.
Right. Well, I better get back to work because I am supposed to be working. Airbus expect me to do something for my salary.
Are you at home?
Yeah, I'm working from home. Yeah.
That's really good. Where do you work?
I work for Airbus Defence and Space. Airbus.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Airbus. I don't know them.
Airbus. They make
Airbus. Oh, Airbus. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So they have a branch which is it's essentially defence and space. So military aircraft, but space technologies as well. Until recently, I think Elon Musk has probably beat us now. But we used to have the most number of satellites in space.
Wow.
But we also do things like secure communications, intelligence solutions.
Do you work with the new Space Force?
I don't personally, but we probably do.
Yeah, the company almost certainly must. Huh?
Yeah.
It would seem like they would be your biggest customer.
Yeah. So ESA, European Space Agency, is one of our biggest customers in the space domain.
Oh well, of course, because you're.
We do some work for NASA as well.
NASA. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Well, maybe the U.S. Space Force hasn't taken off yet. I don't know.
No.
One of those wacky ideas. Hey, let's militarize space.
Yeah.
Fortunately, I think it's probably big enough to handle it, so I'm not too worried.
Mm.
But that must be really fascinating now. My neighbor's son worked for NASA, and he was involved in designing the space shuttle.
Right. Well, yeah.
I'd love to be working on projects like that.
Yeah. No. My last engagement on real projects, customer facing delivery projects, was border security. I was the lead architect for the Saudi Arabian Northern Border Protection System, which was 800 kilometers of protection between Saudi and Iraq.
Oh boy.
Yeah. So that involved surveillance vehicles, reconnaissance vehicles, smart fencing, command and control.
So, a little more engineering goes into that than just building a wall, right?
Yeah. And there was a lot of analysis of the missions that needed to be performed, the overall aims, the design of the organization, the activities that they'd be performing. And then all of the technology which is needed to support that.
Yeah.
So it was very rich.
Wow. Yeah.
I learned a lot from that. But
now must be.
My role now is, as I say, I'm the overall architect for our engineering processes for the division. So my job now is essentially organisational transformation internally.
Wow.
Yeah. So,
well, I certainly hope I don't. I certainly hope I don't. I certainly hope that I don't ruin your mind and get you fired.
No, it's certainly, so my engagement with system science has certainly changed me. So I used to be more orientated towards, I would say more towards project management. but I have a
Uh-huh.
much greater appreciation of systems and complexity now, which
Yeah.
is really, really, really useful. But I
Yeah.
have to be careful about the language I use at work.
Yeah, I'm sure.
So
Yeah,
that
this jargon won't fly. Yeah.
so that they don't think I'm crazy,
Yeah, exactly. Right. Well,
or
you know,
so they don't realize I'm crazy.
yeah, yeah. Crazy is okay, but you can't come across as being crazier than they are.
Oh, they're a different kind of crazy. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Well, so you know the Holon model. Another incarnation of that is Peter Senge's learning organization.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And so it might be a good idea to take a look at that too, because I think that's a
Mm.
concept that they would be familiar
Yeah.
with in
Yeah.
management.
I have read the fifth. I have read the fifth discipline. I actually gave it away.
Yeah.
But I have another one of his books as well, which is an extension of that.
I didn't dig into it too thoroughly, but
That one.
the dance of change. Yes, I don't know if the fifth discipline. So I don't know if he shows a model in there or not. But some of his earlier things where he was drawing it, you know, I said, well, that's basically the 4 quadrant cycle.
Mm. Right.
Anyway, I'll let you go.
A lot. Thanks a lot for your time, John. I appreciate that.
Sure thing. I hope it helped in some way.
Yeah, it did. Yeah, yeah. I'm not too crazy. I think I'm on some sort of right track.
In the sense of a diversion, anyway.
Yeah. Right.
Okay.
Take care then, John. Right. Bye-bye.
See you. Bye.